Hey, this is Barbecue, and you are listening to What's on Joe Mind.
Oh my gosh, this is so great!
Welcome to The Pull Bags Origins Episodes. Join TFG1 Mike as he grills this week's guest on just how they got into reading comics and more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy The Pull Bag.
G.I. Joe is the code name for America's daring, highly trained Special Mission Force. Its purpose, to defend human freedom against Cobra, a ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule the world.
He never gives up, he'll stay till the fight's won. G.I. Joe will dare. G.I. Joe! G.I. Joe!
Hello and welcome to The Pull Bag. This is yet another Origins episode. I am your host, TFG1 Mike, and for those of you who don't know who are joining us for the first time, an Origins episode is where I wrangle any kind of Cobra agent around to talk about their introduction to comics, how they get into comics, how they're maybe not even reading comics anymore, what companies they like, what companies they may not like or care for. And last time you heard Mike from What's on Joe Mind. I can't say his last name. I just can't. I know he told me how to say it in the episode, but I'm just not going to because I'll butcher it.
Just call him Just call him. Sorry to interrupt you, but just call him Beachhead Mike. He loves it when you do that. Yeah.
There we go. Beachhead Mike, who probably wants to marry Jem. Anyway. Alright, so as you heard, I have the Commander-in-Chief, Gary Godsoe of What's on Joe Mind with us today.
Good night,
Hello,
or good
sir.
evening, good night, hello, whatever, yes?
Yes, hello, whatever. Hello, whatever, I'm here. And why I wanted to have Mike and Gary on the Origins episodes for the Pull Bag is we're a year or so into the show, and all the Origins episodes have talked about everything under the sun. We had JT from Saskatoon talk about the strangest of strange comics. We've had a lot of people talk about Marvel and DC and Transformers and Turtles and all that other good stuff. And we hadn't really hit G.I. Joe, or we hadn't really hit Destro and his metal face. So that's what Mike and Gary are here for, is to talk about the G.I. Joe comics. And normally how I start these off is, Gary, was there a certain person in your life, or was it just a pass down, or did your parents just say, here's a comic, go leave me alone for 10 minutes? How did you, what was your breaking into comics for reading?
Good question. Well, basically, I do remember my first issue of G.I. Joe. It was purchased by my mother at a local drugstore here in town, which since got bought out by CVS, and it was issue number 16, the Night Attack version, or the Night Attack issue. Mm-hmm. And it was strange to be actually getting something like that from her because she was a school teacher. And still, this was the day and age of comic books where they were still frowned upon in school. You kind of hid them in your desk, and if the teacher saw them, sometimes they'd get confiscated or just plain thrown away. And so I was really amazed when we were sitting at a drugstore. She knew I loved G.I. Joe. I saw the G.I. Joe comic book commercials on TV, which at the time they were on all the time. And she's like, sure, go ahead and grab it. So that was my introduction. Not only did she surprise me with that, but she clipped out the subscription to Marvel Comics in the back, checked the G.I. Joe box for me, and then had a subscription then sent to our door pretty much from issue 19 forward. So that was kind of my introduction to Joe and comic books, and from an unlikely source, my mom, the school teacher.
Yeah, there was a lot of things back in the 80s that just wasn't copacetic for school.
Well, as she put it, yeah, she didn't teach me any good English, by the way. As she put it, any type of reading is good.
Yes.
And so she said, if it's a book, it's a magazine, it's a comic book, it's good. You're sitting there and you're reading. Now, if we want to do a podcast on video games, that's where she frowned on majorly. She wanted nothing to do with video games. But a comic book, ironically, was okay.
Yeah, I so want to make a books with pictures joke right about now, but I'm not going to. Because I think she probably would have frowned on that too if you were reading a certain or not reading a certain magazine.
Oh, yeah, she would have frowned on that. You're right.
Yeah.
Age appropriate, of course.
Yes. I'm a dirty old man. What can I say?
Oh, we all are at some point.
Yeah. All right. So with Joe being your first introduction, as a kid, did you ever read any other comics, or was it just G.I. Joe?
It was pretty much G.I. Joe, and there's two reasons why. Number one, I was never really a big superhero fan, although I did watch all the superhero cartoons and whatnot after school and on Saturday mornings. That was not a problem. Just never really got into it. But you got to keep in mind, at the time, the G.I. Joe one was the only one doing commercials. They were out there throwing it out there saying, read G.I. Joe, buy the toy. Read G.I. Joe, buy the toy. Well, guess what? They got me both on both hooks right there. And eventually it became the cartoon. So read G.I. Joe, buy the toy, watch a cartoon. And they suckered me in all hook, line, and sinker. And I never really did get a chance to read a lot of the other Marvel or DC superheroes at the time. I am now because naturally I have more time on my hand, more disposable income. And, of course, it's nice to have a nice hookup at Marvel Comics with a good friend like Arun Singh. But back then, not so much.
Okay. So as you're growing up, did you ever stop reading the comics? Or was there ever a point where, that your 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old brain said, oh my God, they did this? No, I'm done.
It really ended around it was in the 60s, I want to say 63, 64, 65, somewhere in there. It was about the time that Outback, Stalker, and Snowjob got captured in Barovia. And my subscription ran out, and I was at the point in my life where sports and basketball that I was playing was more important, and girls and that type of thing. And G.I. Joe was becoming less and less, which I picked up all on that later in life. But so that pretty much just all stopped for me. Kind of abruptly, as you change focus as a kid rather quickly, and you're just like, this is what I want to do from now on. At the time, it was basketball and girls and some other interests in your hobby, and that's kind of where it stopped. But I never picked up another comic until I was probably into my 20s by the time I picked up another comic after that.
So were you already in college or out of college by that time?
I was. At the time picking up a comic, I was out of college. I was actually married. And the interesting thing that got me back into Joe Comics is that I was collecting all this stuff from my parents. And this actually got me back into Joe collecting in general. Again, they just box after box after box. They got rid of all my Star Wars stuff, but they kept the Joe stuff. And I was just box after box of Joe stuff. And then all of a sudden there was this just like big canvas bag that I kept of all the Marvel issues. And at the time, the Marvel issues came in like the best way to put it is if you ever had a family member or maybe you had a subscription back to National Geographic in the mid 80s, they came wrapped in like a plain brown wrapper type thing. Mm-hmm. That's how your issues came to you when you got them in the mail from Marvel. And I had a bag full of these things. I said, I got to check these out. And comics was my launch into the Joe community, and which later started What's on Joe Mind and everything that I'm involved with now. But I was like, is there a community that people read these things still? Oh, yes, there's Yojo. There's all this stuff. They still sell these things on eBay so I can catch up and get current? Okay, cool. Get on eBay. That was my first eBay account was to get up on eBay and to get myself current and buy all the back issues that I missed as a kid.
That must have been a chunk of change.
It was a nice chunk of change, but I was a little more than I wasn't halfway home. I was almost halfway home in terms of the total Joe run. Mm-hmm. But having the older issues certainly helped out. The newer issues were a bit more current and easier to find, with the exception of 155. 155 was a little bit of a challenge, but that was the last Marvel number in the Marvel run. But getting some of the later issues, such as in the 90s, was a little bit easier because they weren't that old. But going back to issues that I missed, For instance, one of my favorite issues, number 11, because that's one I didn't have, and it also is the debut of one of my favorite Joes, Snow Job. That issue, for some reason, it was really tough for me to get, and I went to a big bidding war just to get that one issue, but money well spent every single dime.
Very cool, very cool. All right, so podcast affiliations aside, you know, are you a Marvel or a DC guy?
I would definitely consider myself a Marvel guy.
Okay. So since you've quote unquote grown up, because we haven't really none of us have really grown up at all.
Only in size.
Yeah. So as you're getting into this now, when you found the Joes again and you got all caught up and everything else, what did you start reading other than them? Did you just read them for a number of years, or when did you really get back into Batman and Spider-Man and all that kind of stuff?
I totally caught up on Joe. And then at the end of the Joe run, or actually it was more in the middle of the Joe run, but they had these 4 special issues featuring the Transformers. And I said, this might surprise you, Mike, but it's like, okay, I got to check out these guys a little bit and see. So I got a couple of Transformer issues. It didn't really set the same way with me as Joe did, unlike most everyone else who seems to be a Transformer fan.
Who was writing the books that you were reading?
I don't know. But I didn't really start getting into superhero comics on a regular basis until basically the start of this Marvel movie run, because I never had Iron Man was a watch you wore, not somebody that not Tony Stark who wrapped himself in armor. So I was like, oh, there's a whole comic history behind this, and you wanted to go, you read about it on Wikipedia, and that just gives you a tip of the iceberg. And now I'm going to get more of these comics and read this. Same thing with Captain America. Same thing with a lot of the Avengers. And I found myself liking the Marvel superhero world a little bit more than the DC world. I read a couple of the Batmans. Nothing really fancy. A couple of the Superman, again, nothing really fancy. But they changed their titles and rebooted so many times. This is like the story as I knew it, as I watched Batman or as I watched Superman as a kid, totally changed, and it kind of just turned me off a little bit. Marvel does it too, but now I understand why versus back then where I didn't really necessarily understand why.
Mm. All right. The reason why I asked you who was writing those Transformers comics is because apparently, and I think this is probably more recently than it was back then, there was a few people writing Transformers comics a number of years ago that didn't really know how to write Transformers comics. That's why I asked you which it was, because there was a whole run there where they started that ongoing that wasn't very good.
I could say
right.
It wasn't Larry Hama.
No, Mike Costa.
Yeah, okay. All right.
All right. So you said that Snow Job is your favorite Joe. Is there a favorite iteration of him? Is it the cartoon? Is it, it can't be the movies since he hasn't been in the movies yet, as far as I know. Because I've seen both. He wasn't in Retaliation, was he?
No. He did have a Rise of Cobra action figure that came with the snowmobile. Yeah.
Unless it's in the. Well, it's not that I'm frowning on the figure.
But he's not in the movie. No,
he's not in the movie. But is there a certain iteration or a certain storyline from him that they've done over the years that you find is your favorite?
Well, being that he's a specialist as an Arctic trooper. There's only so many stories that you could really include the guy in. I mean, you can't necessarily. I think it's the stupid monkey guys.
Stupid monkey guys.
Chicken. Robot Chicken.
Oh, Robot Chicken.
It's been a while since I've seen them, but they did a skit with Snow Job where they're like, it's time for action in the jungle. Oh, but you can't go. That's like, well, yeah, exactly. Snow Job doesn't typically go on missions in the jungle or missions in the city or that type of thing, or missions underwater. about the best I've seen him really, and I'm not a cartoon fan, was in that very first Mass Device series, that the Mass Device miniseries that came out, where he is on the first mission to go get the radioactive crystals of death, and he's there with Snake Eyes, and I think we had Flash and Scarlet and oh god, there was one other Joe on that one. I can't remember who it was. But they go out into the Arctic, and of course they're all riding the polar bear or the battle bear snowmobiles, and then they run against Major Blood, and then they run against Snake Armor and the radio or the radioactive crystal of death chamber and everything. And he had the whole Eastern accent and everything. It was a horrible Eastern accent, and you know what I'm talking about, the whole Boston accent and everything, because the character the character
we can still park the car in Harvard Yard, thank you.
There you go, very very good. He's like, and
that's not an impression, ladies and gentlemen. I'm originally from Boston.
He's calling Scarlet like, hey there, pretty lady, and stuff like that. But that's about the best I've really seen him, because when I close my eyes as a kid, he comes from Rutland, Vermont. You'd expect to see him in the deep Arctic on a mission like that. And, when you expect to hear him talk, you probably would expect him to hear him talk like that. And he was voiced by none other than Rob Paulsen.
Rob Paulsen, yeah. I would think that if, not to say the current state of government would even have a G.I. Joe unit, but I would think if a G.I. Joe unit was real today, Snowjob would have a lot of work right now.
Well, his actual specialties is something that maybe more along the lines of 10th Mountain Division would do, where they actually do ski, and they do a little bit more in terms of what Alpine would do as a Joe, which would be doing mountaineering. But one thing that Snowjob is not really known for, but is specifically mentioned in one of the Order of Battle books, is that he's a world-class biathlete. Well, right now we're in the middle of the Olympics. Guys, go watch the biathlon. That's cross-country skiing, and then stop and use a rifle and hit four or five targets on a single shot. So shoot, ding, reload, shoot, ding, reload, shoot. You got to do this 5 times in the middle of cross-country skiing. Now, Mike, I don't know if you've ever cross-country skied. I tried it once, and it is arduous. So sit there and cross-country ski, and then stop, come to a rest, and use a gun to pick off targets at a distance. It's a bit of a challenge. So Snowjob is also known as being a world-class sniper, which people don't typically equate for him on the G.I. Joe team. They kind of give that more to Lowlight, but that is one of his actual duties. He is known as a world-class sniper.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I tried skiing when I was 6, and that didn't really work out.
Yeah, it didn't equate well to me.
Skiing, any kind of skating, whether it's on wheels or blades, no. I enjoy hockey from the sidelines, thank you.
I can handle the wheels, but anything that involves a flat surface on snow, forget it myself. I'm a flatlander.
All right. Okay, so any other, what are you currently reading besides, obviously, G.I. Joe?
I have now a subscription to the Marvel Online archive, so I grab whatever kind of floats my boat. A lot of the Avengers versus X-Men, a lot of Iron Man, a lot of just various Spider-Man, various Thors, just kind of catching up and whatever catches my eye. In the past, I also did a good deal of reading of of some of the Devil's Due stuff, such as Voltron, and when they had G.I. Joe as well. When IDW had some of the Transformer titles, Mike, I really tried, and I just couldn't really get into them. But I did try the Transformer titles. But whenever I have time, I definitely try to read whenever I can. And then I've been reading a lot of independent stuff, such as we got this new comic that we were pitching on the show, What's on Joe Mind, from Chris Sims and Chad Bowers, called Downset Fight, which is an independent comic about a football player that goes on a vigilante spree against evil mascots. So it's an interesting book, but I read that type of stuff too.
Have you seen that commercial? It is a commercial. I don't know what series it is. It's one of them stupid reality show series, but it's like sci-fi or I don't remember which channel it's on, but it's about mascots. It's the first thing that popped into my head when you said evil mascots. I'm like, oh great, that's a good reality show right there. All right. So you keep saying you've tried and tried and tried with Transformers. Have you tried recently, since James Roberts and John Barber have taken over writing duties on More Than Meets the Eye and Robots in Disguise?
No, but that doesn't say that I shouldn't give him a chance. Barber has been on What's on Joe Mind before, and I have a great deal of faith in his editing skills and his storytelling skills. So I should definitely give those guys a shot.
Well, I'll tell you this. Start with The Death of Optimus Prime, which is a one-shot about... It really has nothing to do with the actual movie. It has to do with the IDW continuity. Start there. At the end of that book, you can go down two paths. You can either, jump on the Lost Light with Rodimus and his crew and leave Cybertron behind and go search for the Knights of Cybertron or Lights. I forget what the hell they're searching for. They're searching for something and they never find it, I don't think. Or you can stay on Cybertron with all the characters you might know and enjoy and basically relive the United States political agenda. No, it's the Robots in Disguise book is what is the one that Barber writes, and the beginning of it is basically trying to establish a functioning government in Iacon on Cybertron.
Okay.
With Bumblebee in charge at first.
Wow. Okay.
It takes characters you know and might enjoy, and basically there is some stuff that you might recognize, and then there's a lot of stuff you might not. If you want something more of a space adventure, grab More Than Meets the Eye, because I was skeptical. Because like I said way back in episode 3 of the podcast, I first got into full-time comics back in 2012 with the Joker returning with Death of the Family.
Mm-hmm.
And then, people keep telling me about the Transformers comics, and then a friend of mine, Ender, who's been on the show several times, said, oh my god, I can't even put into words how awesome that origin for Shockwave is. And I was like, all right, well, I asked him, I said, listeners have heard this before, but anyway, I asked him, I said, do I really need to read the first 10 issues to catch up to what? He said, yeah, you do. So he basically forced me to go out and get the trades for More Than Meets the Eye. And my initial hesitation about even getting it was, I'm not sure if I'm going to even like these characters, if it's just going to be rip-offs of characters I know and enjoy. The only characters that are on the Lost Light that we know from previous continuities, Ratchet, Rodimus, Ultra Magnus, Rewind, and Chrome Dome.
Okay. The
rest are all kind of newish kind of characters. I'm sure they've been around, but it's an interesting read, I'll give you that much.
Oh, fair enough. I mean, to well round yourself, you should probably try a little bit of everything. And it's been a while, so fair enough. I'll definitely have to check it out.
Yeah, if you were going to recommend to me, not that I will, but where should I start with Joe?
Where should you start with Joe?
No, like current stuff, not the old stuff.
Well then, okay, if you're not into the old stuff, do not read anything in the IDW continuation of the old Marvel series, which is still pinned by Larry Hama, starting at 155.5, which was a free comic book day comic about 3 or 4 years ago. Because really, what you need to know in 155 forward, and we're knocking on the door 200, so they've got almost 50 issues well in the bank on this particular line.
Yeah.
You really have to go back into the original Marvel run, and the continuity sticks because Larry is sticking to it.
Well, and I can appreciate that because I am a stickler for continuity myself, but I don't know if it's not the writing, it's the art. And I don't know.
You don't like Gallant's art?
Well, no, it's not that. It's every time I pick up an old comic, whether it's from the 90s, 80s, or whenever,
Okay.
it just, like, I read Iron Man Armor Wars for Marvelous March, and I'm like, okay, I know this story. I've seen it in the cartoon. I've seen it in Iron Man 2. Why do I need to read this? And oh my god, that art style is horrible. The colors,
Yeah,
yeah.
if the art style, well, the art style is not going to change. The colors, yeah, you can change that. And IDW has done a little bit of that. They've gone back in time and got permission from Marvel to reprint some of those earlier issues and bind them. And good friend of our show, Mark Bellomo, has been doing previews and forwards in a lot of those particular bound issues from IDW. You can get your hands on a couple of those just to get a preview. Kind of, it's think of, and I'm gonna put it in bad terms for geeks, but think of Lucas getting a hold of Star Wars, just not adding those scenes, but sharpening things up. That's all he's doing. They're sharpening up the colors and the artwork. That's about it. They're not adding any, tauntauns running around in the background or anything like that. They're not doing anything like that. But they are sharpening up the colors, and maybe that would help. There was one scene that he was telling us in one of the issues where I think it was issue 20, and this is when Clutch goes home, and he was saying that the scene actually had Doc in it, but when Doc was drawn, the person that was coloring didn't know that it was Doc. So everyone knows that Doc is a black guy that wears glasses, green glasses, and has green fatigues. Well, when the guy coloring, all he sees is a guy wearing fatigues and glasses. So he painted the fatigues green and kept the glasses white. Well, and made it a white guy. In the Joe world, to us, that's Short Fuse. So he colors Short Fuse, but it's meant to be Doc. So what they do is they end up going back and correcting that particular issue by making it Doc instead of Short Fuse.
So basically, it's like some Fox News guy.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
It's some Fox News. No. Listen. It's some Fox News guy mistaking Samuel L. Jackson for Lawrence Fishburne.
Okay, I would go that far. That was hilarious.
All right. What Spider-Man stuff have you been interested in?
Just the most recent. I think the most recent I read was The Death of Peter Parker. That was December a year ago, I think.
Yeah, it was issue 700.
Yeah, and that was pretty interesting. That was basically on a recommendation of Arun saying you gotta read this. It's really good. It's written by this great writer, got great art in there, and I liked it. But the thing is, it was pretty much enough to be a standalone story as it is, because I didn't go any further after that. So I've been mainly reading a lot of the Avengers stuff lately, though.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about the Avengers as a team. I can never bring myself to be that interested. I don't know what it is about them. The only time I got really interested, and this is going to sound sad, was the movie.
And that's what got me into it, yeah.
Well, if you had that team in the comics, the team from the movie in the comics,
yeah,
I probably would read it. But when you add in like Vision and Ant-Man and Wasp and all these other characters from United We Stand, right, I just don't care.
Yeah, there's a point where the Avengers become too big, and then it's all of a sudden like Super Friends all over again. So I kind of like the smaller Avenger team, and some of those, especially versus Avengers versus X-Men, the Avenger team was just absolutely huge. It had everybody that wasn't a mutant, right? And then every X-Men was every guy who was a mutant. So you're sitting there reading and go, who the hell is this? And then you look up in the Marvel Encyclopedia and go, oh, okay, I got who this is and everything. So the movie team I tend to like, because you get any bigger than that, and maybe like the first half of the season, for instance, of Earth's Mightiest Heroes, where you only had like 6 dudes. That's fine, but like I said, any bigger than that, you're getting into Super Friends territory where you have everybody teaming up with everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. See, that's the thing, though. okay, sure, you can blame Super Friends, you can blame the 70s, but when they redid it as Justice League and then they went Justice League Unlimited, yes, it was a big team, but the producers of that show broke it down to where each episode was like 2 or 3 or 4 members per mission. So that I don't mind, but if the Avengers stuff is the entire team all at once,
And
wow,
and the 2 or 3 guys per mission is just like how Hama did it with the Joes. I mean, how many members of the Joe team were there? There was over 100 at one point. You can't have all 100 going into action all the time. So that's why you will have a situation where Stalker and Snowjob and Outback are going on a mission, or you would have a particular one-off issue where you have Steeler driving his tank in a parade with Zap and I think Short Fuse in the tank. You can't have every member going at it. There's very few issues where I remember the whole team just flat out going at it. I mean, issue 1 was one of those particular issues where it had the original. Every member of the original 13 was engaged in issue 1, and then the Cobra Civil War, where it just seemed to have every member of the Joe team whatsoever was thrown into this big invasion of Cobra Island. But you don't have it very often in Joe.
Yeah. All right. What? How do you feel about the state of comics nowadays?
The state of comics, well, I got to say it's pretty good. I don't think sales of Joe will ever get to where they were back in the 80s, but I do think the general state of comics is good. And you got to look at all these shows and all these pop culture events, and they are built on and based upon the comic genre and the comic book reader. And as long as these shows keep popping up and pop culture remains as popular as it is, I think these comic book properties are going to be the thing that movies are going to continue to go after. I mean, you look at some of the highest grossing movies of all time, and what are they? They're all comic book properties. So comic books are leading the way in terms of what we're seeing in mass media these days.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever watch, and God, this must feel like a repeat for people listening because I recommend this stuff every time. Did you ever watch Batman Beyond? Have you ever seen it?
No, I have not.
Okay, well then there goes that recommendation. Let me see here. What else am I reading? Well, you kind of like stuff from Massachusetts, right? Kind of.
Everything but the Patriots.
Wow. What a jerk.
Come on, I have no idea why you as a Patriot fan is all offended about that. I mean, you did beat my team in the playoffs, and the last two times we played, you hung some pretty big points on us. I don't know why you're offended.
Oh God! All right, I'm starting. I have yet to read it. It's so funny. Sometimes when I go to my comic shop, if they don't have the number 1, but they have like the most recent, like the 3 or 4 most recent issues, I'll grab them anyway, and I'll go back and try to find the number 1 later. So I've got this series called Coffin Hill. It's from DC Vertigo.
Okay.
It's a magic kind of based. It's not Twilight, but it's magic based. It's based in like the Salem witch trials and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And I'm really, really interested to read it. I wish by now I would have started reading it. I think I'm just gonna have to break down and get issue 1 on Comixology to kind of get myself caught up. But
don't you hate that?
Yeah.
All these TV shows these days, and I blame 24. I think it started with 24. When you miss one freaking show, you can't watch the rest of them. And that's how I am with comics these days. If you miss one episode, I have to go back and read the back ones before I can proceed any farther. So I absolutely know what's going on.
Yes, and I'm kind of like that with comics. That was my hesitation of getting into comics for the longest time. Because like I said, as a kid, off and on, I would have comics, but I never collected as a kid. I never had a subscription to anything as a kid. Um, but that's always been my problem is, okay, if Batman 617 is out now, you mean I have to read the last 616 issues to catch up? No, thanks. With the number one, though, I mean, it's not. Coffin Hill's only 6, 7 issues in so far, so I mean it's fairly new. But it looks really interesting, and it takes place in Massachusetts. That's the whole reason why I brought this up. So that's really what it wasn't even the magic or whatever kind of other kind of comic it was just that okay, it takes place in Massachusetts. Okay, I'm gonna buy that now.
Right.
That's all it was for me.
Well, a lot of times these days, series don't go very long before they reboot anyways.
Yeah, no, yeah, I don't want to get into the whole thing.
But you look at the IDW G.I. Joe series. I mean, we've gone through at least 2 different writers, and I think they're going to end that here soon. And they've done the Cobra Files, and they've done some other kind of spin-offs from the IDWs. In fact, this goes back to your question you were saying earlier. If you were to want to read something G.I. Joe, but not have to go all the way back to June of 1982 in order to get an idea of what everything's going on, just pick up the IDW Cobra series. Start there.
Okay. That'd be interesting. Now, do you... I need to start asking people this. I haven't been, but I need to. Do you prefer the print, the actual copy in your hand, or do you like digital better?
You would think as an IT guy, and as we always kid in our program, that the well-paid IT guy, that I would prefer the digital. I actually prefer the print. I like going and owning something and putting it and adding it to the library. If it's digital, I guess I can go back and re-download it at some time, but if I have to reformat my hard drive or my computer crashes or whatever, that data is kind of lost and I'll have to go back out and grab it again. But I like having the real tangible artwork in my hand that I can flip pages and then put back in with the bag and board and add it to the library.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I only broke into digital and even signed up for Comixology because of where Batman Beyond went with its 2.0 currently.
Right.
That's really the only reason. And now I keep, even though I don't have any kind of smartphone or any kind of smart device at all, I just read it on my computer. And Comixology, I mean, unless the website dies, if I have to reformat my computer, I'm not going to lose anything because it's all on their end. So yeah, but I'm like you. I do prefer the print and actually being able to sit down and read. And I will say, and I've said this before many times in the show, IDW has got the right idea. Let us read the whole story first, and then put the ads at the end. Because every month, whether it's a book, whether it's a title I absolutely love or not, I hate reading a page and it's like, oh hey, that's awesome. Where's the next part of the... Oh wait, it's like a friggin' commercial. It's like a cliffhanger on I was like, oh god, no.
Well, we really turned to G.I. Joe after these messages. Well, actually the Joe comics back in the 80s had that as well. And I think part of the nostalgia when I go back and read those are looking at those ads. You see these ads for... the old ads for Mile High Comics before there was internet, contact us for your back issues.
No, that I can understand.
Well,
I can understand why you like, but I'm sorry, nowadays.
Nowadays, you got the internet. But back in the day, you had all the old video game ads. And what was that one ad that you sold so many of these things that you could earn points to get, like, the X-ray glasses and stuff like that, or the sea monkeys, stuff like that. Oh, I remember I just one of the things I did with my comic collection when I got a full run is I got out my scanner and I scanned every front cover of every Joe issue. And you're asking, that's what's so different than what you see on Yojo? And that's right. There's no different than what you could see on Yojo. But what I did when I was done is I flipped them over and I scanned all the ads on the back. That is a time capsule right there.
Yeah.
I mean, all these Atari 2600 games and television, all this old, not even 8-bit video game stuff. I mean, we're going back to turn my TV to channel 3 and flip the switch in the back and plug in a cartridge type stuff. All those ads back in the day, I loved them, every single one of them. And
I could see that. Yeah, I could see that. If you're going back and reading through the old comics, I could see enjoying those then. I'm sorry. With today's comics, no. I every time I get an IDW book, whether it's whether it's one of the 2 ongoings, whether it's a one-shot, whether it's a mini-series, whatever, I know I can rely on IDW to put all the ads and the solicits and whatever else in the back of the book.
And that's fine. And IDW, actually, I think, for Joe fans, at least has their pulse on the nostalgia level of Joe fans. Not only do they keep all the ads in the back and everything, which is no big deal, they're bringing back the post office pit or the post box pit. You remember, I don't know if you read any old Joe issues back in the day, but the post box pit was the opportunity for you at home after reading an issue to write a letter to Marvel and have it answered, and then Larry would actually have your letter there, and then he would answer it right there on the postbox pit on the page. And they're actually bringing that back, and I think that's something very cool that IDW is doing with the Joe comic.
Yeah, they're doing it right. They are doing it very right, and don't get me wrong, I still like certain parts of DC, but after April, I will only be getting 3 titles from that company. And Marvel, I don't know what it is. I love some of their characters, but I just can't bring myself to fully get into or commit to any of their comics. I don't know what it is. Like, I love the X-Men. Like, X-Men for me are Wolverine, Scott, Jean, Beast, Rogue, Storm.
Yep.
The 90s team.
Right.
Let's put it that way.
Right.
The 90s team. The 90s cartoon team. I like Daredevil. I like, to a certain extent, Punisher, but I prefer to see them in animation or in the live action films than read their comics. Like Superman, love the movies, love the cartoon series. Well, most of them.
I'm not so sure that. Well, I can't really speak exactly for what Marvel's doing, but it's pretty clear they're kind of becoming a media company and less of a print company. And obviously, you see where all their money has been made lately, and it's been made at that box office and not print. I think at first it was movie to supplement the print, and now print is now supplementing the movie because the movie's bringing in everything. So I think more and more we'll start seeing a lot more Marvel movies. I mean, heck, you have it's Phase 2's coming out. You have the Guardians of the Galaxy, which is their kind of the first group of superheroes that's kind of a 3rd tier, 4th tier type team, and that's coming out with the movie. So. Yeah. I think they've just pretty much made up their mind that we're going to be animation and we're going to be major motion pictures, and the comic books and then we'll sell our licensing to Hasbro, and Hasbro will sell our action figures.
Mm-hmm. And DC, they want to be an entertainment company. They want to be.
I will say that I just saw the Lego movie. And I don't know if Lego went to both of them and said, hey, which one of you is going to pony up the most money, and we could feature either the Marvel figures or the DC figures. I still don't know why when that movie came out they didn't feature the Marvel features, the figures, the minifigures and characters. But they exclusively featured the DC characters in there. They need to do more of that, because you're right, and I see where you're getting. I mean, a lot of the DC movies are not as well received as the Marvel movies. I'm not going to say they're bad because there might be fans out there and say, "Hey, you don't know anything about these
Here's
movies."
the problem. Here's the problem. You look at Marvel, okay? Look at Marvel as early as 1998. They did Blade.
Ooh.
Okay?
Well, actually, Blade series I did like.
Right, but I'm saying, like, one of the first, like, current, like, in the last 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years that I can remember Marvel movies, not counting Transformers 86, because technically that was Marvel Productions. But anyway, Blade was the first movie that I ever really saw that said Marvel on it.
Right.
And then in 2000 they had X-Men and all this and all that up to now. You look at DC. You travel back to 1978. You get Superman 2, 3, 4, Superman Returns. Along the lines, you get Batman, 2,
Wonder
3,
Woman on TV.
4. Wonder Woman on TV, yes,
Yep.
that was good. My point here is that, and I've said this for the last 6 years that I've been podcasting, Marvel does movies well.
Yes.
Marvel does continuity in movies well.
Yes.
And for the most part of what I've seen of their animation, it's not like... It's not bad, but it just isn't my cup of tea. I did see that thing, I forget where it was. It was probably on, well, it would either have to be on Disney XD or Disney, since Disney owns Marvel.
Right.
But Marvel Maximum Overload, where it was the Lego characters.
Yes.
I did see that. And I like that, but like the general Marvel animation, it doesn't grab me. Whereas on the other side, DC, they do excellent in animation. They're doing well in animation. And their movies over the last, 40-something years, I think? 1978. Yeah, last 36 years. Superman, Batman, Green Lantern. Hey, let's have Van. My point here is that DC believes, and this is just my personal opinion, I believe that DC believes that the only characters that people are going to pay money to go see is Batman and Superman. And now, they're not even giving either one of those characters a chance because they're going to do a team-up already.
Yeah.
My whole point in this when I started talking about Superman is I like Superman in other media, television, animated series, films, Superman comics. It's just another one of those things I just can't get into. I don't know why. It doesn't translate to me as a reader because I've seen all this stuff in movies and TV.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I mean, I just can't believe Superman punching through Brainiac's robotic face on a 2D page when I can see it, 3D animation and Superman animated
series, I'm with you.
You know?
I'm with you. Yeah.
This is my whole point here. All right. Any recommendations for the listeners out there that you want to give out?
Any recommendations for? Well, if you've never
Stuff to read, comics to read,
stuff to read. Well, obviously, we're going to shell GI Joe here a little bit. I think if you haven't got a chance to read any of the bound IDW editions of the classic Marvel run, pick those up. Just grab one, flip through it, see what you think. I would recommend anything in the first 20 issues, first 20, 24 issues as issues that are good. I would even say if you want to find something on the cheap, go to Devil's Due and find some of the bound issues of the Disavowed series, which I hate they call it Disavowed because really the guys that worked on that particular series, which was a continuation of the Marvel run and later penned by some friends of the program, Brandon Juro and some other folks. To call it Disavowed means brings it the quality of it less into question, and it's anything but that. It's some good stuff. Pick up the Devil's Due stuff. That's good stuff too, and you could probably pick it up on the cheap. If you want to pick up Joe and you don't want to know anything about Joe other than and forget about the movies, but you just know about Joe in general. Retaliation was good. Come on, man. But if you want to pick up,
said forget about the movies.
Well, we'll allow you to forget about Rise of Cobra. But if you want to pick up Joe and just pick it up in a very general content that you know it's a team of specialized soldiers, then pick up the IDW series that's coming out there. But there you go. But if you want to really get into, when you see all these action figures coming out, and you see they have these backstories to him, and you want to know, why is he called Duke, or why is he called Clutch, or why is he called Breaker, or my favorite character, Snow, why is he called Snowjob? Then you probably want to go back into the Marvel run and read those. You're really not missing anything that's going to set you back too horribly expensive if you pick up the bound editions and just scan through them. So that's kind of my recommendation. Anything in the first 2024 of the old classic Marvel run, anything in the Devil's Due run, you can probably find on the cheap. And if you want to pick up Joe and not know anything, pick up the IDW series.
All right. Where can the people interact with you, or do you want to pimp out What's on Joe Mind and all the other stuff you guys do?
Well, it's not much nowadays, but it is What's on Joe Mind. We are the web's #1 G.I. Joe podcast. You can find us on Podbean at whatsonjoemind.podbean.com. You can also find us on the Geekcast Radio Network. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/whatsonjoemind. And you can always email the program at whatsonjoemind@gmail.com. And chances are we'll eventually read it on one of our shows. May not be today, may not be tomorrow, but it'll probably be within the next year or so.
All right, folks. Also, head on over to, well, by the time this is up, it'll be already over. Never mind. 5041 edit point. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of The Full Bag. Stay tuned for whatever we have coming up next. I'm not sure at this point in time. I want to thank Gary for taking the time to chat about comics, G.I. Joe, and everything else he loves, and we will catch you next time. Make your great escape into comics.
Good night.
Hey, I'm Gary.
I'm Mike.
I'm Chuck.
And I'm Justin.
Join the four of us every week on the internet's #1 and longest-running G.I. Joe podcast, What's on Joe Mind?
It's Joe news, reviews, and interviews like you've never heard them before, delivered right to your MP3 player.
Our guests include Jason Marsden, Kevin Michael Richardson, and Matt Yang King from G.I. Joe Renegades, Larry Hama, Robert Adkins, and John Barber from IDW Publishing, and many more from around the online Joe community.
Yeah, it's guys talking about Joe. Think of it as Joe Talk meets sports talk. And we make fun of Chuck.
Right, and hey, again?
Come on, Chuck. We're just kidding, kinda.
Sometimes Chuck makes fun of himself.
Right, and okay, seriously, this is just getting ridiculous now.
It's What's on Joe Mind, every week on the Geekcast Radio Network, InsidePulse.com, Stitcher Smart Radio, and iTunes. Download and listen today.
I suppose I still can't say something about Transformers, can I?
Good.
No.
What about sports?
That sounds good.
Yeah, that's all right.
It's action. It's drama. It's comedy. It's Decian, the superhero webcomic. Decian's got superhero antics and sexy girls. Read it now at Decian.com. DASIEN.com.
You just heard the latest episode of The Pull Bag, GCRN's comic book review podcast. There are several ways to get in touch with us and leave feedback for the show. You can visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on the episode and all of our different podcasts. You can rate our show on iTunes. Be sure to leave us feedback. Call the voicemail line, 502-526-5821. Please remember to tell us the show you were leaving the message for, and your name. Become a fan of us on Facebook by searching Geekcast Radio Network. You can send us an email, feedback@geekcastradio.com. Follow us on Twitter @GeekCastRadio. So until next time, unleash the geek in you.